In this episode, we speak with Meghan Harris-Ngae, a partner at PwC Canada, where she leads ESG strategy, integration, and transformation, and serves as global sustainability private business leader. With more than 2 decades of experience across industries and markets, Meghan helps C-suites and boards integrate sustainability into their core business models, guiding organizations through climate transition, regulatory shifts, and broader transformation agendas. She was recognized by the Consulting Report as one of the top 25 sustainability consultants and leaders for both 2024 and 2025. PwC is a global professional services leader operating in 151 countries, delivering audit, assurance, tax, and consulting solutions across sectors. I'm your host, RJ Lumba. We hope you enjoy the show. If you like the episode, click to follow.
RJ Lumba is the Executive Chairman of Market Insight Media and Managing Partner of GrowthCap. He is the host of Top Consultant, a podcast featuring today's best consultants who advise and provide services to corporations, governments, nonprofits, and other organizations. Executives and key decision makers tune in to Top Consultant to identify the most knowledgeable and experienced consultants for their most important projects.
Meghan, so great to chat with you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So you have a long history in the field of sustainability. It seems to be a passion of yours. I'm curious how maybe that passion was ignited. You've been doing this, it seems, ever since you graduated college, maybe before you graduated, but maybe tell us a little bit about that passion to get started.
Yeah, I think the passion came when I was in university, actually. I was studying international relations. And at the time, I had this vision that I was going to go work for the UN. I was very much going to take the NGO route. And I really looked at, what I wanted to do and really wanted to make sure that whatever I did from a career perspective, that it would have impact, whatever that meant. And so I was fortunate while I was in university to start working early in the energy sector, squarely within the sustainability realm, which was back in the early 2000s. So it wasn't, as mainstream as it is today. And, I've been fortunate enough to have a lot of opportunity to continue that journey. And we can talk a little bit about what it's been like, because it's been very interesting over the course of 22 years or so.
And what was the most pressing issue then? Like if you had to pinpoint, I want to solve this because it's like so severe and it's going to have the most dramatic negative impact. What was that thing at that point in time?
I would say at that time, I was working in the energy sector. So specifically, if you think about the extractive industry looking to really establish a license to operate, be able to actually operate in specific communities depending on where they had their operations. A lot of it was really around that sort of social license to operate, creating a community around operations. And so that's largely where a lot of the focus was, I would say, early on. That along with obviously your traditional government relations. So I was squarely working within the area of helping the organization really think about how they actually work with the communities where they operate. And I would say that's consistent. I mean, you see that today as well. But that would have been the most pressing issue. You didn't see climate change as mainstream back then. It existed as a topic, but it definitely wasn't a focus.
Mm-hmm. And then fast forward to today, what do you view as the most pressing issue?
It's a very good question. I would say climate change is existential. For us, it's met with resistance. It's very much a political topic. But when we actually take a step back and look at the physical impact of the climate changing, it's having a very consequential effect on every business, no matter where you operate, right? And it's costly. So it's costing governments, it's costing business. And so from an economical standpoint, I would say climate change. But rising to the top right now as well would be AI. So looking at responsible AI and the rise of AI and what that's going to mean, we're now starting to see that rise to the top of the agenda for a lot of organizations just because of how quickly it's moving. And, I would say numerous other topics under the sustainability umbrella, but those are the two that I would say are sort of at the top of the list right now.
And when you refer to AI having an impact relevant to sustainability, are you referring to just the number of data centers that are being built
There's the environmental impact, but there's also just the concept of the workforce changing. You're looking at the impact on humans of AI, coming into play within organizations, the need to govern AI. And so it's having an impact maybe from that angle, but it's also having a positive impact. So you can also look at how AI can actually enable sustainability and to drive improvements across, all dimensions of sustainability. So there's good impact, and then there's maybe not so good impact that we're seeing. And so a lot of organizations are looking at what does it mean to actually look at AI from a responsibility perspective as it becomes so prominent within the organization.
So what I'm hearing is this social element of how may it displace certain workers. Is that what we're getting to?
Definitely. Also, just the ethical use of AI, as it gets developed. I mean, a lot of organizations are sort of trying to keep pace with what it means to actually adopt AI within their organizations and make sure that they've got the right governance practices in place so that it's not being used erroneously. So there's a lot happening in that space right now. So I would say, while a sustainability professional might not have accountability for AI in the organization, we're starting to see a lot of sustainability leaders turn their attention to making sure they're part of setting up the right governance structure around the use of AI.
That's fascinating. Have you started to embark on this in a more fulsome manner with certain large corporations?
It's just starting to, I would say. I mean, as a firm, we obviously support clients across all different realms of AI, helping them adopt AI, for different business purposes. But squarely within the sustainability space, I'm advising a lot of my clients on what their role should be in being part of, say, an AI governance committee to make sure that they're able to bring that social lens to the table, because oftentimes it can get ignored, especially given how quickly it's moving. And so I would say we're right at the early days of seeing sustainability leaders tackle this issue.
Yeah, it seems like where all the interest is and attention is building these massive data centers. And sometimes it's locating where in the US you have the most energy available. Certain areas like in Virginia, there's these areas, is it near Lake Louise, where they have excess capacity. So all of these investors, and it starts with the commercial, the capitalist system first. It's like
Yeah.
we have to get to that area and start building, start securing the land rights, et cetera.
Yeah.
So are you working in that type of scenario?
Yeah, starting to. And so I sit on the Canadian side, and actually where I am based, there's actually quite a bit of focus on data centers because we've got a lot of land. And so, we're starting to work with different organizations to help them access that land. So again, PwC will play a role probably in the mix there, but we're starting to see a lot of attention and a lot of investment in that space where I am specifically in Canada.
So we talked about AI. What other areas do you find that you're excited about where it's like you can leverage your expertise to truly help certain companies and certain industries?
So I would say, the area that I focus on squarely is integration and transformation. So for a long time, sustainability became almost an industry in itself.
Hmm.
So it really, really peaked to become a focus for a lot of organizations, but it almost became divorced from the business. And what we're starting to see now, I mean, there's a lot of backlash right now in the sustainability realm. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that, a lot of organizations focused on sustainability for, reporting purposes, or they did it because they were passionate about it, but they didn't necessarily tie it back to the business. And so where I spend a lot of my time is very much helping companies think about how does sustainability integrate into their operations? Why should it be a focus? How does it underpin business continuity and resilience? And also for some, how can it actually drive different business model change, as well as how can it actually drive the business forward, which shouldn't be seen as something new. But because we've seen so much backlash, that's where a lot of organizations are squarely focused. And so it's challenging, but it's the fun part of the work, being able to actually do that.
From someone who's not a specialist in sustainability, when I think of an environmental impact, like the most negative environmental impact, like where is this all being generated from? I think of industrial companies.
Yeah.
And so it's like, if I think about like, oh, if I didn't recycle this aluminum can today, how much impact would that have? Or if I let my dog go loose and do whatever he needs to do without cleaning up after him, like how much negative impact does it do compared to these massive industrial companies across Asia, across, North America, wherever. How do you view that? Like if you're thinking holistically about how to actually make a dent in saving the environment, where does your mind go?
That's a loaded question. I would say making a dent on a macro level is a difficult proposition because it's a system that is in place, right? Everything from the regulatory, you've got the economy. At the end of the day, we operate in a capitalist model. If you're looking to make a dent, at the end of the day, it's how can you actually influence change, right? And influence an organization to do something differently, not because out of the goodness of their own hearts, because I'd love to think that every business leader thinks that way, but they don't. And so it's very much, okay, how do you actually influence business leaders to do something for the planet that's positive because there's a business reason for doing it? And that's not easy because it's not always straightforward to really understand what the business reason would be to do it, or to influence somebody at the top of an organization to think, okay, why do we need to do this? Because it's actually going to ensure that our business is around for the long term. And sustainability isn't a short-term game. It's long-term, which has always been the challenge. But if you can actually influence somebody at the top of the house to really think about it from a different angle versus just doing it for the good of the planet, that's where you can actually make a dent, I would say.
It's interesting. I once read an article about, EVs and where the break-even point is in terms of it being actually better for the benefit. And I think it was around like if you actually drove the car up to 20,000 miles, at that point, you actually then become an environmentally sustainable owner of that vehicle because there's so much energy that goes into producing
Yeah.
the car. And then, there's this movie out, or it's a series, I think it's on HBO or Paramount. It's like Landman. It's with Billy Bob Thornton
Yep.
and John Hamm.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with it?
Yeah, I've heard of it. Yeah.
Okay. And it's actually quite educational about the oil industry. And he goes into talking about how the oil industry and fossil fuels are actually powering alternative energy, and that the actual usage of fossil fuels hasn't really changed all that much. So curious to get your perspective on the progress we're trying to make by doing these new things, EVs, alternative energy. Are we actually making progress?
It's a really good question because it comes back to this concept of life cycle. So when you actually look at the entire closed loop, so if you look at EVs, how they're produced, where they're produced, you need to go back to what is the energy source that's being used for that production. And that's not just with EVs, frankly. That's with all products, right? You look at plastic, you look at any type of product that's out there. If you actually go back to understand how that good was produced, most of the time it's produced by fossil fuels. And so the projection for fossil fuel use is quite substantial into the future. We're seeing population growth. I don't want to be negative and I don't want to say we're not making progress, but I would say having worked a lot with the oil and gas sector, most have a lens to this and have for a long time. Yes, they're driving production based on need, but it comes down to how do you change the way consumers behave? If there's a demand, organizations are going to produce. And so there's a role for the sector to play in helping with decarbonization, but I haven't actually seen them go as far as trying to change consumer behavior. And so we may start to see a shift in that. I would say we were starting to see that. We saw it with some of the European oil and gas companies, but we've seen a shift, I'd say, over the last 18 months, which is interesting, which is why I want to say we had to go back to go forward, maybe. And I'm going to stick with that, the optimist in me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I get in the mail these offers to switch my energy provider. Like it's like, I think it's called Clean Choice. And you're like, shows you how much better it would be for the environment if you switched over. But I'm thinking like, is that truly the case? Because all this stuff is getting powered ultimately by the fossil fuels. And so even if I change my behavior and I'm saying I'm committing 100% to all of these environmentally sustainable companies and services, it's not changing the macro in any way.
I'd love to say that it is. But I would say your average consumer isn't necessarily going to go and ask that question, right?
Yeah.
And so you might make a decision based on that. But most consumers are still making decisions based on economics. They're not necessarily making a decision based on, is this going to actually reduce my own personal carbon footprint? But I'd like to say that is shifting. I'd like to say we're starting to see a micro shift, maybe not a macro shift. And I've seen it with younger generations starting to think differently, and what matters to them is different. So they're starting to ask more questions and they're starting to make decisions differently. So yeah, it might feel like baby steps, but we'll take micro change for the time being.
Right. Curious if you could share an example, maybe one that you're most proud of how your sustainability consulting helped a company. And you don't have to share, specific names. If you'd like to, you can, but it would be great to hear.
What I would say, and I'm going to generalize a little bit here for a minute, is that because I've been working with companies globally in this space for so many years, I've been able to see the ones that were truly able to benefit from actually doing something, not doing it because a regulation told them, not doing it because they had to issue a report, doing it because it made business sense. And I can tell you on average, if I think of 10 of my clients, 70%, I would say, are still staying the course with what they adopted, say, 10, 15 years ago, because they've been able to actually see the benefit to their business. And they've been able to see that it's actually foundational for them to continue operating. And so for me, I see that as a measure of success, because I can tell you in the last 18 months, we've also seen significant backslide by a lot of organizations, and a lot of that was political. But you've seen many stay the course in spite of the political realm. And it's because they see it. And I'm generalizing, but if you look at diversity, equity, and inclusion, which became very political, you look at climate change, also became very political. A lot of organizations have stayed the course in making sure that they're still addressing those issues, but they're not necessarily being as public facing as they used to be. And that's fine, but that's a measure of success if they've kept going. If they stopped any of it, it's because they didn't actually see the business reason for doing it in the first place. And so that's how I would measure success in terms of the clients that I've supported.
Excellent. So you have the trifecta in terms of working for some of the largest consulting firms, starting off with Deloitte, then EY, then PwC. They're all fantastic firms. I was wondering if, for the benefit of our audience, if you could share your perspective on maybe the differences between the firms.
I'd say all the firms are similar in terms of structure, services. All firms have great talent, great expertise, great industry depth. My view is it comes down to people. And if somebody's looking to hire a consultant, you're going to look for, can you work with that person? Do they have enough experience, deep expertise? So I would say, at surface value, you could say all the firms are the same, but getting to know the actual people and the team that you're working with is what's actually going to make the difference, right? And understanding, when you say depth of expertise, what does that mean? Like for me, I've been in this space for 23-ish years. That's different than somebody that's been in it for 4. And for me, I've always said that a measure of success for me as a leader is to actually bring people along, train, mentor them. And so all the firms have great talent, but when you're actually choosing to work with one, it really comes down to really understanding who you're working with, what they've experienced, in order to understand if they can add the value that you're looking for.
That's wonderful. And you've clearly succeeded in your field, and you've been in it, as you referenced, for a long time. You bring people along with you. In terms of your clients, how is it, what do you focus on to enable you to be such a good advisor to your clients?
I've asked my clients this question because sometimes, it's difficult to assess that on your own. And they've said, obviously, the depth of experience, the lived experience, the ability to connect. And so the ability to develop a relationship. I mean, I've had clients that I've been working with for a very, very long time. I would say those are the 2 things. And practical guidance. So not coming in and being theoretical, not coming in and saying, you need to do this for the sake of the planet, coming in with a very practical mindset and helping them be successful in whatever role they're in. and making sure that I lead with that. And I would say that's the feedback that I've received from clients, which was really helped propel me forward, being in professional services for so long.
The last two questions. One is, can you tell us about a person who's had a profound influence on you?
My dad. I was thinking about this question and I was like, I've had a lot of clients that have had an impact on me. I've had mentors in different areas of my life, career-wise. But, my dad always said, treat people with respect, be kind, be resilient, focus on, driving forward productively in your career. And it always stuck with me because it's not been easy working in a career like this where you're constantly sort of up against people that don't necessarily agree with you or there's backlash against what you're saying. And I think just always coming back to what it means to be human, empathetic, and respect. For me, that's served me well through all stages of my career and also in my personal life.
Last question. Can you tell us about a charity, cause, or other endeavor that you're passionate about?
So I'm very passionate about climate change adaptation. And so I serve on the board of an organization called PwC Canada. And what they do is they go into fire distressed areas and essentially plant trees. It's a fairly simple business model, but very critical, especially within the Canadian landscape with the impact of fires here. I'm also very passionate about mental health. And so I personally support a lot of mental health organizations in the community where I live as well.
Wonderful. Well, Meghan, want to thank you again for taking the time. It's been a great conversation.
Great. It's great to meet you. Thank you so much.